Hi, I'm Sly Grandpa. Let's start our story. I never thought my own children would look at me like I was a burden. I raised them in this very house, hammered the nails into the beams with my own hands, patched the roof after every storm, and paid the mortgage while working 2 jobs just so they could have a home full of warmth and stability. At 74, my legs aren't as strong as they used to be, and sometimes I need help carrying groceries, but I'm not useless. At least, I didn't think I was. The whole thing started on a quiet Tuesday morning. I was pouring myself coffee, listening to the tick of the old kitchen clock, when I spotted an envelope sitting on the counter. It was addressed to my eldest son, Martin, but the return address was from a real estate company I recognized from town. I don't make a habit of snooping, but curiosity got the better of me. I slid the letter halfway out and my heart nearly stopped. It wasn't just some casual inquiry, it was a draft contract for the sale of my house. The house was listed under Martin's and my daughter Laura's names, as if they already owned it. I sat there staring at the paper, my hands trembling so bad I almost spilled coffee all over it. At first, I thought it had to be some mistake, maybe even a scam. But the signatures at the bottom were real, my kids had already signed. The only thing missing was mine. I tucked the paper back into the envelope before Martin came in, whistling like nothing in the world was wrong. He kissed me on the head and asked if I wanted him to pick up anything from the store later. I said no, my voice steady somehow, though my stomach was boiling. I realized then and there, they weren't planning to tell me a damn thing until the ink was dry. That night, lying awake in my bed, I kept replaying every smile, every, "we're just looking out for you, Dad," conversation we'd had over the last few months. They hadn't been checking in out of love. They were casing the joint, making sure the old man wouldn't notice when they pulled the rug out from under him. And I'll admit it, at first, I felt crushed. Betrayed. But the more I thought about it, the more something inside me hardened. If they thought I was too old, too soft to fight back, then they were about to learn just how wrong they were. I wasn't going to confront them, not yet. No, I'd play dumb. I'd smile and let them think I was slipping, that I didn't suspect a thing. Because the only thing better than catching someone in a betrayal, is making them believe they've already won. And when the time was right, I'd take everything back, piece by piece. 2 days after I found the contract, Martin and Laura invited me over for dinner at Laura's place. That, in itself, wasn't unusual. Laura likes to play hostess and Martin never turns down free food. But something about the way they were both, overly cheerful on the phone set off alarms. I said yes, of course. If they thought they were luring me into a trap, I was going to step right into it, with both eyes open. When I arrived, the table was already set with wine glasses, candles, the works. Laura had cooked roast chicken, my favorite, though I noticed she didn't ask me what I wanted, she just assumed. "Dad," she said as I walked in, "you've been working too hard keeping up with that old house. We've been talking, and we think it's time you considered a change." I played dumb, fork in hand, chewing slow like I had no idea what she was getting at. Martin jumped in. "We just want what's best for you. That house is too much. The stairs, the yard, the repairs. You deserve somewhere comfortable. Safe. Maybe a nice retirement community." Retirement community. The words made my jaw clench, but I forced a laugh. "You two make it sound like I'm about ready for the grave." Laura reached across the table, touching my hand. "Don't say that, Dad. We just want to make sure you're taken care of." Her eyes flicked toward Martin for the briefest second, and I caught it. They weren't just concerned, they were rehearsing a script. All through dinner, they laid it on thick. How much easier life would be if I didn't have to mow the lawn. How new friends in a community would be good for me. How selling the house would give me financial security in my later years. Every word was polished, practiced. I nodded and smiled, even cracked a few jokes to make them think I was buying it. But inside, I was cataloging everything. The way Martin avoided my eyes whenever money came up. The way Laura's voice dipped when she said, "We've already looked into some options." Options. As if my opinion was already irrelevant. When dessert was served, Martin finally laid it out. "There's a buyer interested in your property, Dad. All we'd need is your signature, and you could be settled somewhere better before winter." I set my fork down carefully, like the weight of it might betray the anger burning in me. "I'll think about it," I said, keeping my tone light. Their shoulders relaxed, smiles widened. They thought they'd made progress. They thought the hook was in. But what they didn't know was that while they were scheming to strip me of the home I built, I'd already decided, if they wanted a game, I was going to outplay them. And unlike them, I wasn't bluffing. A week passed before the next crack in their facade showed itself. I was at Laura's house again. This time she had asked me to watch the kids while she and Martin ran a few errands together. I didn't mind. My grandkids are the one part of this family I still felt was pure. We built Lego towers, played cards, and I tucked them into bed by 8. By 9, I heard the front door click, followed by hushed voices in the hallway. I should have gone out to greet them, but instead, I froze in my chair and listened. My hearing might not be perfect anymore, but I catch a whisper better than most. "Martin, the realtor said if we can close before October, we'll get the higher market price. We can't drag this out much longer." "Laura, I know. But Dad's stubborn. We need to keep him comfortable, make him think it's his decision." Martin laughed then, a cold sound I'd never heard from my own son. "He'll cave. He's old, tired. Once he realizes we've done all the work, he'll just sign." I swear my blood ran ice cold. Old. Tired. Like I was a withered branch ready to snap. They had no idea I was 10 feet away, fists clenched so tight my knuckles ached. Then Laura's voice dropped even lower, and I had to strain to hear, "Once it's done, we split the money and Dad can go to Meadowbrook. It'll be fine." Meadowbrook. That retirement community they mentioned so sweetly over chicken and mashed potatoes. I knew it wasn't about care or comfort. It was about control. Money. Convenience. I sat there in the dark, teeth grinding, forcing myself not to storm into the hallway and explode. Confronting them now would only give them the chance to double down, to manipulate, to paint me as the unreasonable one. No. This had to be played carefully. So when they finally walked into the living room, finding me pretending to nap in the recliner, I cracked one eye open and smiled. "Have a nice trip to the store?" I asked. Laura nodded, all innocent. Martin patted my shoulder like I was some fragile relic. "Thanks for watching the kids, Dad. You're the best." I chuckled, nodded, and watched them leave with their little secret safe in their pockets. But it wasn't safe anymore. Because now, I had a secret too. I knew everything. And I'd use their own confidence against them until the very end. The next morning, I woke with a plan forming in my head. I had lived long enough to know that revenge wasn't about fury, it was about patience, timing, and precision. If I rushed it, I'd lose. If I waited, I could make them crumble on their own. First, I needed information. I couldn't just wing this, I had to know exactly who was involved, every move they'd made, and how far the realtor had gone. So I started small. A phone call here, a casual question there. "Oh, Martin, do you know the name of that buyer again?" I'd ask innocently, pretending I'd forgotten. "Oh, Laura, did you say you were meeting with the realtor today? How did that go?" Every response was a breadcrumb, and I collected them all. Then came the subtle manipulations. I started dropping tiny hints that made them nervous. "I've been thinking about downsizing, maybe even renting it out instead of selling." I said it casually over breakfast, as if it were an offhand idea. Both Martin and Laura froze in their minds, though not visibly. Later, I overheard Martin muttering, did he just say he's thinking about keeping the house? That's going to ruin everything. I smiled to myself. That was exactly the kind of crack I wanted to see. They were so confident that I'd cave, that I'd never see the trap coming. They didn't realize that every lie they told, every secret plan, was building the perfect ammunition for me to use against them. I even started playing up the old man act, misplacing things, pretending to forget small details, wobbling a little more when I walked up the stairs. I let them believe I was weakening, that the endgame they envisioned was near. And all the while, I was quietly preparing the first part of my counterattack. I'd make them think they were winning, let their greed blind them, and then I'd strike in a way they'd never expect. By the end of that week, I already had them flustered without them knowing why. Martin was pacing the living room like a caged tiger during our calls, and Laura was more anxious than ever when I brought up options for the house. The seeds were planted. And soon, I would water them with their own fear. It was time to escalate. I knew they were obsessed with selling the house quickly, and I also knew they were counting on me to sign without a fight. So I decided to introduce a little chaos into their carefully laid plan. I called a local real estate agent, an honest one, someone I could trust, and told him I was considering selling, but I wanted to test the market. I made up a buyer, a phantom couple, and asked the agent to draft some preliminary paperwork and even schedule a few showings. Nothing binding, just enough to get the rumor going. Then I leaked it, carefully, innocently, to Martin and Laura. "Oh, I had a call from someone interested in the house today," I said casually at breakfast. "They're very keen. Think they'd make a good offer." I watched their reactions like a hawk. Martin's jaw tightened, and Laura's fork trembled ever so slightly. The panic was delicious. They started calling each other in whispers, strategizing in front of me as if I were too senile to notice. "If Dad signs anything with them, we'll lose control," Martin hissed into the phone. Laura responded, "We have to move faster. Maybe push him to the community next week, before they get serious." Perfect. They were falling into my trap. The more they worried about this phantom buyer, the more reckless they became. They forgot that I was watching, listening, and planning 3 steps ahead. By the end of the week, I had successfully turned their greed into fear. Every move they made now was sloppy, rushed, and full of mistakes. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Because the real fun, the part where they realized just how badly they underestimated me, hadn't even begun. By this point, I knew I needed more leverage if I wanted to truly turn the tables. Playing them against a fake buyer was only part of the plan. I needed proof, something undeniable that would make them squirm and give me the upper hand legally and psychologically. That's when I reached out to my old friend, Henry, a retired lawyer who had helped me with the house decades ago. I explained the situation carefully, trying not to let any hint of my anger slip. Henry chuckled darkly. "They're trying to steal from you, aren't they?" he said. "Don't worry, I've been waiting for this day." We devised a quiet surveillance plan. Nothing illegal, just smart, above-board stuff. He instructed me on documenting phone calls, keeping copies of suspicious emails, and even subtly recording conversations where they hinted at selling the house behind my back. He reminded me, the more casual they felt around me, the more mistakes they'd make. I also started testing their loyalty among extended family. I casually mentioned to cousins and a few old neighbors that something strange might be happening with the house. People who had known me and my family for years began to watch the kids, overhear snippets, and sometimes offer warnings. I didn't have to do much, whispers were enough to make Martin and Laura paranoid. And paranoia is a dangerous thing for greedy people. Soon, they were questioning each other's judgment in hushed tones, biting at every word, and jumping at shadows. Their overconfidence was turning into anxiety, exactly how I wanted it. That night, I sat in my chair by the fire, sipping tea, feeling the first sweet taste of control. The house wasn't just mine physically anymore, it was mine strategically. But the biggest reveal, the part that would really make them choke, was still waiting. And it was going to hit when they least expected it. The following week, I decided it was time to test just how far their greed would take them. I invited Martin over under the pretense of discussing house options, and, of course, I made sure Laura was listening in through a video call. I brought out a stack of papers, the phantom buyer's offer, some mock contracts, and even a fake pre-approval letter. I acted hesitant, pretending I didn't fully understand any of it. "I don't know," I said slowly, flipping through the papers, "maybe this is all too complicated for me. I wouldn't want to make a mistake, Anne." Martin jumped in immediately. "Dad, we can guide you. You just have to sign. It's simple, really." He tried to grab the papers from me, and I pulled them back, smiling innocently. Laura's voice came through the call, a mix of excitement and worry. "Dad, it's such a good opportunity, just think about it carefully." I let them stew for a few moments, then I casually asked, what would happen if I wanted to rent it out instead? Could I still get the same money? The panic was instantaneous. Martin stammered, Laura gasped. They hadn't thought of that. "Well, Martin started, clearly flustered. We could, we'd have to." I feigned confusion and concern, keeping up the act of the indecisive old man. Meanwhile, my mind was ticking, knowing that every second they panicked, every slip of their worry, was one more thread I could pull. By the time I let the conversation end, I had them tangled in their own desperation. They were desperate for me to sign, desperate for the phantom buyer to remain interested, and utterly blind to the fact that I controlled every piece of the game. When I hung up, I sat back and allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. Their overconfidence had turned into chaos, and it was only going to get worse. Little did they know, the real trap was about to snap. By now, Martin and Laura were visibly unraveling. Their messages to each other had gone from hushed and calculated to frantic and jittery. Every text, every call, every whispered word was a window into their fear, and I was watching it all carefully. I started dropping tiny hints to friends and neighbors, too. "Funny, isn't it," I said casually to Mrs. Patterson down the street, "how some people think they can make decisions for you behind your back? Can you imagine?" I smiled sweetly, pretending to be confused about the world. Within hours, the rumor mill had started turning. People were asking questions. They were talking. And Martin and Laura, hearing about these curious neighbors, became paranoid. At the same time, I escalated the phantom buyer situation. I instructed the real estate agent to send another message about the couple's interest, but this time, with a condition. The buyer supposedly wanted the house delivered completely free of personal items, all furniture gone, and the garden professionally landscaped. I watched Martin's text spike with panic, his messages becoming increasingly desperate. "Dad will never agree to this. We need another plan." Laura started calling me more frequently, pretending to be caring, but I could hear the edge of panic in her voice. Every conversation felt like a tightrope walk for them. They were so busy trying to manipulate me, they didn't even realize they were digging their own hole deeper. That night, I sat in the kitchen, the soft hum of the fridge the only sound. I held a cup of tea, savoring the quiet chaos I had orchestrated. Their overconfidence was their weakness, and it was turning into a weapon in my hands. The real storm, though, the one that would leave them gasping, had yet to come. And when it did, it would leave them questioning every single decision they'd ever made about me. It was a Saturday afternoon when I called for a family meeting. I told Martin and Laura it was about estate planning, casually suggesting we all sit down and discuss the future. Naturally, they were eager, seeing it as another chance to steer me towards signing over the house. I smiled to myself, knowing exactly how I was going to flip the table. I set the scene perfectly, papers neatly stacked, the coffee brewed, and my old tape recorder discreetly placed on the sideboard. Nothing illegal, just smart documentation, a little insurance in case things got messy. I wanted every word captured, every slip noted, without them suspecting a thing. As soon as we sat down, I feigned confusion about the documents. "Which one of these do I sign first?" I asked innocently, flipping through them like an old man lost in paperwork. Martin leaned in, eager to guide me. "Start with the offer from the buyer, Dad. It's straightforward." Laura chimed in, "You'll see, Dad. We've made it so simple." I nodded slowly, letting them bask in their assumed control. And then, casually, I asked the question I'd been saving, "So, who exactly owns the house if I agree to this?" Their smiles faltered. A bead of sweat appeared on Martin's temple. Laura's hand trembled ever so slightly. I could see the wheels turning frantically. They hadn't expected me to ask that, and suddenly the entire foundation of their plan began to wobble. I leaned back, sipping my coffee, letting the tension settle. "Because," I added softly, "I wouldn't want to sign something that doesn't legally belong to you yet. That could be messy." The room went silent. The confidence they carried into the meeting was gone, replaced by panic and confusion. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: power. But the best part, the part that would leave them gasping in disbelief, was still coming. And it was going to hit even closer to home than they could imagine. A few days after the family meeting, I made a call that sent Martin and Laura into a tailspin. I contacted the real estate agent I'd been working with, the one handling the phantom buyer, and asked for a small favor: a fake appraisal report. Nothing illegal, just a preliminary market analysis, showing the house's value had unexpectedly dropped due to a supposedly planned zoning change in the neighborhood. When I mentioned it to them casually over dinner, I had the agent run a quick report. "Looks like the property's value might not be as high as we thought." Their reactions were priceless. Martin's fork hit the plate with a clatter, and Laura's eyes widened like saucers. "What do you mean?" she demanded, trying to mask panic with authority. "Oh, just preliminary," I said, waving a hand as if it was no big deal. "The neighborhood might be rezoned. Could affect the sale. I suppose it's better to wait a bit and see." That night, I could hear them whispering furiously in the kitchen after I'd gone to bed. Martin muttered, "We need to push him," maybe threatened Meadowbrook. Laura countered, "No, he's too smart. We can't push too hard, or he'll figure out we're lying." Perfect. I let them stew in their fear, imagining the loss of the perfect deal. Every sleepless night, every frantic call between them, was a piece of satisfaction I savored. I wasn't done. Not even close. They thought they were controlling the narrative, but in reality, they were characters in a story I was writing, and the climax was approaching faster than they realized. Because soon, they'd see that the house wasn't just mine to protect, it was a weapon I could wield against them. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when a knock on my door changed everything. I opened it to find Mr. Thompson, the town's notary and a man who had known my family for decades. He looked serious, almost grave, and held a thick envelope. "Mr. Carter," he said, "I believe you need to see these documents before anyone else does." I took the envelope, my heart pounding slightly. Inside were copies of deeds, contracts, and unsigned agreements, documents Martin and Laura had been preparing to finalize the sale without me. Each paper had their signatures, dates, and my absence marked like a glaring omission. Mr. Thompson gave me a small, knowing smile. "I was suspicious when they approached me without you. Thought you'd want to handle this carefully." I nodded slowly, feeling a rush of vindication. Not only had my children tried to betray me, but the web of deception was far bigger than I realized. I calmly placed the documents on the table and smiled at Mr. Thompson. "Thank you. I think it's time they understand exactly what happens when they underestimate their old man." By the afternoon, Martin and Laura were buzzing around, trying to guilt-trip me with visits and phone calls. I acted indifferent, sipping tea and casually rearranging the papers. "Oh, those documents?" "Yes, I saw them," I said casually. "Interesting, isn't it, how things can happen without proper authorization?" Their faces went pale. I could see the wheels in their heads turning, realizing the walls of their scheme were starting to crumble. And yet, the full reckoning, the part where they would truly grasp the consequences of their greed, was still waiting. I was just getting started. By this point, I knew the best way to hit them wasn't with legal threats or money, it was with fear, uncertainty, and the slow, creeping realization that they had underestimated me. I began planting tiny psychological traps, dropping hints that made them second-guess everything. I started with casual phone calls. "Oh, Martin," I said one evening, "I was thinking about donating the house to the Historical Society. Seems like such a shame to see it leave the family, doesn't it?" His voice froze over the line. "Dad, what are you saying?" he asked, trying to sound casual. I just chuckled softly. "Nothing, yet." Then came Laura. I would make side comments whenever I saw her. "Funny, isn't it, how people try to take what isn't theirs?" Or, "I wonder how some things could be reversed if someone really wanted to." Her responses were frantic, defensive. They were beginning to crack under the weight of guilt and fear, not knowing what I knew or what I might do next. Even my neighbors got involved, without me needing to do much. I'd let rumors slip naturally, friends mentioning to Martin and Laura that they'd heard Dad was considering something interesting with the house. I'd overhear Laura whispering to Martin, "I think he's on to us. I don't know what he knows." Watching them unravel was intoxicating. Their overconfidence had turned into anxiety, their schemes were collapsing under the invisible pressure I was applying, and I hadn't even moved the first real piece in my master plan yet. And as I sat in my favorite chair each night, I realized just how satisfying the final act would be. Because soon, the walls of their betrayal wouldn't just be crumbling, they'd be completely demolished. I knew it was time for the next stage. Martin and Laura were panicked, but they still thought they held the advantage. That misconception was about to cost them everything. I scheduled a casual lunch with both of them at my favorite diner, somewhere neutral. I wanted witnesses, public space, and an atmosphere that forced them to act polite, perfect for observing their guilt and hesitation. As we sat down, I pulled out my phone and casually played a recording of one of their whispered conversations about selling the house without my knowledge. I acted like it was an accidental playback. Laura went white, Martin's fork froze midair. "Dad," Martin began, but I waved him off. "Oh, it's fine," I said softly. "I just find it fascinating how certain people think they can take what isn't theirs. Luckily, I like keeping things documented." I tapped the phone and smiled. "Makes me wonder how many other people know about your little scheme." They stammered, tried to argue, tried to blame each other, but the damage was done. For the first time, I saw real fear in their eyes. They weren't just worried about me, they were realizing they had underestimated the consequences of their actions. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. The power dynamic had shifted completely. And as we left the diner, I whispered to myself, the best part of revenge is making them feel the helplessness you once felt. But the grand finale, the part that would truly shatter their confidence and give me complete control, was still ahead. By now, Martin and Laura were walking on eggshells around me. They tried to act casual, but every glance, every hesitation, every tiny slip gave me ammunition. It was time to set the final trap, something that would make them realize just how completely they had underestimated me. I arranged a final meeting at the town hall with the real estate agent, the notary, and a few witnesses from the neighborhood. I told Martin and Laura it was for a routine discussion about the house. They showed up, confident as ever, thinking they were in control. I let them believe they had manipulated me into compliance, that the phantom buyer was still the driving force. When the meeting started, I calmly presented the real documents, the deeds, the contracts, the signed letters, and explained to everyone, step by step, how my children had attempted to sell the house behind my back. Their faces went pale, the mask of confidence shattered instantly. I revealed the recordings, the inconsistencies in their paperwork, and even the fake appraisal that had them frantic for weeks. The room was silent except for my voice, explaining in detail how I had known everything, how I had watched and listened, and how I had carefully turned their own greed and paranoia against them. Martin and Laura could barely breathe, realizing that not only had I survived their scheme, but I had orchestrated an exposure that would leave their credibility and pride in ruins. I ended with a smile, calm and steady. The house isn't going anywhere. And neither is the lesson you've learned today. Their shock, their humiliation, it was exquisite. But I saved the best part for the very next day. Because the final blow, the one that would etch this entire saga into their memory forever, was coming. The next morning, Martin and Laura were still reeling from the public exposure. The shame of being caught trying to deceive me hung over them like a dark cloud. But I wasn't done. Revenge, real revenge, isn't just about humiliation, it's about ensuring they never try something like this again. I called them to my house one last time, calmly, like nothing had happened. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the living room. Their hesitance was palpable. I had laid out a small surprise, folders detailing their every scheme, side by side with my own careful records of evidence, along with a handwritten note: "Every lie has a trail. Every betrayal has a cost." They tried to speak, to explain, to justify, but I held up a hand. "I've already made my decisions," I said softly. "The house stays with me. All attempts to manipulate, coerce, or sell it without my consent are null and void. And you will respect that, or the legal consequences will follow." I could see the defeat in their eyes. Martin, usually so self-assured, looked like a child caught in a lie. Laura's bravado crumbled entirely. And for the first time in decades, I felt fully in control, not just of the house, but of the narrative of my family, the story they tried to rewrite without me. Then, the final stroke, I handed them each an envelope containing a check, enough to show some generosity, but clearly a symbolic gesture. "Consider this a lesson in respect," I said. "The rest, well, I hope you've learned your limits." They left quietly, broken, humbled, and strangely grateful. And as I closed the door behind them, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of betrayal lift. The house was safe, the legacy intact, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled with a deep, quiet satisfaction. I had survived their plot, outsmarted their greed, and reclaimed control over my life, and my home. And let me tell you, it was better than any victory I could have imagined.